You're listening to Fade to Black with your host, Jimmy Church, on the Dark Matter Radio Network. Don't run and hide. Don't be afraid. Don't turn away any longer. The truth will set you free. And now, your host, the captain of conspiracy, the prince of paranormal. This ain't your daddy's radio network show. This is Jimmy Church, Fade to Black.
All right. Hey now. What's up, everybody? It's another week. This is Fade to Black. That's right. Today's Wednesday. March 19th, 78 days into the new year. As always, we are live from the JP Motorsports Studios right here in Burbank, California. I'd like to welcome everybody listening around the world, hither and thither, to and fro, far and near, north and south. For KJCR and the Dark Matter Radio Network, I am your host, Jimmy Church. Welcome. As always, I start off every show the same way, usually, with a proud salute to the men and women in uniform all around the world who are fighting the good fight for us right now. Without them, there is no me, there is no you, there is no us, and you can't hear me right now. Little hiccup. All right, let's go. I'm going to say cracking for the first time. Let's get it cracking. The world in the last 14 days has turned into a crazy place, hasn't it? But let's try to bring it back to normal. I'll do what I can. That's what I'm here for. Today, actor Bruce Willis is 59 years old. And you know you're old when Bruce is 59. Bassist Billy Sheehan is 61. Oh, I forgot to mention Die Hard for Bruce Willis, one of the greats. But Billy Sheehan, 61 years old. You know, my favorite thing that Billy Sheehan ever did, and he did a lot of good stuff, but I'm serious about this. That first David Lee Roth record, Eat 'Em and Smile, with Steve Vai, that was a good record. I don't care what anybody says. Every song on that record's a toe tapper. Our dead guy birthday today is Wyatt Earp. Wyatt Earp died in 1929. Kind of hard to believe it was 1929 because you think of Wyatt Earp and, you know, you think of like the gold rush days, but he died in 1929. Follow us on Twitter at JChurchRadio. Facebook, JimmyChurchRadio.com. That's the fan page. YouTube is KJCR Fade to Black. All the past shows are up there. I think we're up to date, minus Dolan Part 2. Oh, what a crazy week for everybody out there. I mean, all around the world. It's just crazy what's gone on in the last 14 days. I mean, the Olympics ended and it just like went to crap. Tonight, as always, email throughout the show, Jimmy@JimmyChurchRadio.com. If you can pierce the veil of those producers staring at me through the glass right now, you get through them and get to me, that means it's a pretty good email. So do it. And I'll read it on the air. I promise. And I might even write back. Tonight we're going to have some open lines later on. I've got a couple of things really cool that are going to go on tonight. Right after our first break, which we're going to take in a few minutes, I am going to have on the air a captain for a major U.S. carrier. That's a 777 pilot. This is a veteran. And I'm going to have him on for a few minutes. And tough to get somebody on a show to talk about the Malaysian Flight 370, specifically about the 777. Our producers here got contacted by this gentleman, and who was referred by another friend, vetted and checked. Didn't have to go too far because my best friend is his best friend. So there you go. But we got him. And this is for me, this is a big deal. And for everybody out there, I am more than surprised that over the last week or so that we haven't gotten more email or phone calls about it, because I know it's on everybody's mind. And I don't know. Now, we're going to talk about it tonight also with our guest, Richard Sauder, who is down in Ecuador. And we're going to spend a little time on the Malaysian situation and some other subjects too. But so I'm going to save my opinions for those two guests. And probably the majority of those opinions are going to be saved for Richard Sauder. For the captain that we're going to have on in a few minutes, I'm going to ask him more black and white. I just have questions. And I'm so burnt out on the talking heads, which I personally can't stand anyway, but what can you do? And you can't escape it. But the repetitiveness of nothing, and that's what it is. It's a repetitiveness of blackness, of nothing. And it's just imagine repeating nothing. It's like a blank spot in a CD playing over and over again, because we're not getting anything new. Nothing. But they know something, don't they? I know it. You know it. They know it. And we're playing this cat and mouse game. And what the end game is to the cat and mouse, I don't know. I don't. But I'm going to do my best. And I promise to get to the bottom of it. We're working on it really hard. The bumper music tonight, as always, is Doug Aldrich from White Snake. Actually, I saw some pictures of Doug over the weekend out in Las Vegas with this thing that he's doing out there. And his son, Ryder, on stage with him. I don't know. I think Ryder's 4 years old. Got a little air guitar action going on this huge stage. One of the coolest photographs I've seen in a while. But and I know that Doug is listening right now. So, Doug, thank you. And it looks like you're having a good time with old Ryder. The Ukrainian situation I had mentioned earlier. Since the Olympics, we've gone to crap. And the world right now, I mean, it just reminds me of that tension that we had for decades. And it seems like we lived without it for so long now, we have forgotten what that was like. But I kind of feel that edginess now, that thing that you can kind of reach out and touch. And that's what I think, and so let me just get to my straight thought. I just don't think we're going to go there. I think everything's going to simmer down. Somehow things are just going to work themselves out. I don't know how, but I think all of us remember, that are old enough to remember, those days, that Cold War era day. I don't think we're going there. I don't. And as much as I hate to say it, but Crimea is not worth it to anybody to go there. And the good people of Ukraine are going to work it out, but I just don't think it's going to get crazy. I don't. I can't see it going there. And if it does go there, then it has the potential of spinning completely out of control. I've heard, I've gotten emails and references to NATO troop movements going on right now, and of course Russia's building up on different borders, and it's just crazy. But I just don't think it's gonna. I don't. I believe. That's my good side. That's it is. This is my good side. You might think I'm nuts, and I know that there's somebody listening right now going, Jimmy, you are so wrong. I just believe in the good of man. I think we all have a heart. I don't think Putin is that nuts. I really don't think he's that nuts. And I'm glad that of all the times we've ever needed a Democrat in the White House right now, it's probably a good thing, because if we didn't, it would be really ugly on all fronts. And I feel really good about that. Okay, so look, we've got a busy, great show lined up, and we've got a lot to get to. So let's just do the first things first. Let's go ahead and do a quick break, and when I come back off of the break, we will have our captain on the line. In the meantime, get the emails going. I can see now the producers have sent in 3. The show hasn't even started. Jimmy at jimmychurchradio.com is the email. Let's get it going. It's going to be a good show. And I'll be following Twitter tonight, too, as well. And so Twitter is at JChurchRadio. And that's about it. You are listening to Fade to Black. I am your host, Jimmy Church. This is the Dark Matter Radio Network. Don't touch that mouse. Get the emails going. And I'll be back in a second with, should I call him Iceman or Maverick? I always wanted to be Iceman. He can be Maverick. We'll be back right after this. Don't touch that mouse, everybody. Fade to black. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Jimmy Church Fade to Black on the Dark Matter Radio Network.
What's up, revolutionaries? It's me, Jimmy Church. Do you have an IRS or state tax issue? Well, I did, and I called national tax experts. My problems were fixed, done, fini, and man, I got to tell you, it was a relief. National Tax Experts are a recognized tax office that services clients in all 50 states. Doesn't matter where you live. Give them a call. I'm telling you, they take the time to understand each and every client's individual financial status as well as their financial goals. And that's exactly what you need, my brother, when you're taking on the evil 3-letter. So, seriously, give them a call today at 1-877-909-5444. Again, 1-877-909-5444, or go check out their website, www.nattaxexperts.com. That's NATTAXEXPERTS.com. Tell them Jimmy sent you.
This is KJCR at JimmyChurchRadio.com
on the Dark Matter Radio Network.
All right, everybody, welcome back. Fade to Black. You know, I am going to jump straight into another break. I hate to do this to everybody, but we had a bad connection. And I've only got one shot before this pilot gets on his own flight. So I hope everybody appreciates that and just stay with me. I'm going to take one other quick break. I hate to do this. I really do. But we don't have a choice. So we're going to fly straight into it right now. No pun intended. And I've got to reset this connection with our pilot. He's literally in a terminal. So with that, I'm going to take another quick break. I will be right back. Stay with us. One 800-916-6232. That's the number you need to call when you are seeking spiritual enlightenment and searching for your true purpose here on earth. www.lovespellstoday.com. They provide psychic readings, love spells, reversal of spells, custom spells, chakra balancing, energy work. Divine guidance is just one phone call away. Call 1-800-916-6232 for your free psychic reading. I did. And tell them Jimmy sent you.
Hello, I'm Julie, and you're listening to my main man, Jimmy Church, on jimmychurchradio.com.
My name's Nick Dominguez.
Hi, I'm Rex Dominguez, and I listen to jimmychurchradio.com. Jimmy is your preacher.
Amen.
This is Toby Kebbell. You're listening to jimmychurchradio.com. Don't hurt me, Jimmy. I'm only little.
Hey, I'm Adrian Grenier, and this is Ari Gold. We're the Honey Brothers. We're of the Honey Brothers. Hey, I'm Adrian Grenier.
And I'm Ari Gold.
We're the Honey Brothers.
And you're listening to Jimmy Church.
The Revolution.
KJCR.
jimmychurchradio.com. Despite popular opinion, reading a book will not make you smarter.
But listening to Jimmy Church will. On the Dark Matter Radio Network.
All right, everybody, welcome back. Fade to Black, KJCR on the Dark Matter Radio Network. Keep the emails coming. Jimmy at jimmychurchradio.com. Got a great show lined up tonight. I would like to welcome, he is a pilot for a carrier, major carrier. We're going to go with John. Can I call you John?
Sure can.
Okay.
Jimmy, thanks.
Yeah, thank you. I was going to do that Iceman Maverick thing, and I just didn't think it was too cool. So let's just go with John and
probably not.
Yeah, John and Jimmy, and we'll fly with that. So no pun intended. Okay. So now, thank you first off for coming on the air. And it's a very uncomfortable situation right now with what's going on with this. And before I ask the obvious couple of questions, with your experience, and you have flown a 777.
That's right.
With your experience, not to ask, have you ever heard of this happening before, but with your experience, is it possible that it could happen? And I hope you understand the question. I mean, it just seems like with today's technology that what is going on right now would be a near impossibility, a vanishing.
Yeah, I can see how it could happen. Over the United States, you're not going to see something like this happen because air traffic control is is very thorough, and there's a lot of ground-based radar involved. But once you get out over the ocean, airplanes rely on self-reporting to transmit their positions, and that can be disabled, as I'm sure you've read in the news. There's no ground-based radar out over the middle of the ocean. It relies entirely upon the aircraft reporting its position. Back in the old days, it was verbal with HF, high-frequency radio, verbal position reports. And recently it's gone to digital data links with a backup of high-frequency radio. So since it's dependent upon the aircraft, that can be obviously disabled. And there you have it, an airplane that no one knows where it's at.
When you're sitting in the cockpit and you have your co-pilot, or I guess they're still called co-pilots. Is that what that would be? If one is a captain, who's your partner to your right?
Captain and co-pilot.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Captain and co-pilot.
Is it possible for somebody, the co-pilot? Okay, let's just suppose everything that has gone on. Let's take hijacking out of it, or somebody coming into the cockpit. But let's just stay with this hypothetical. Would it be possible for the captain or the co-pilot to input autopilot data, change the direction of the craft without the other person knowing about it? I mean, aren't you watching the heading always in front of you? Is it possible?
No, you would know.
You would know,
if
wouldn't
one person,
you? And
you would. If the other person did something, you'd know it.
And so if that's the case, and again, this is how my brain works, because I'm one of the good guys. So if I see something like that going down, either I allow it to happen because I'm a co-conspirator, or I'm going to beat the crap out of somebody. You know what I mean? Is that how that would go down in the, I mean, somebody, it's either one or the other. It can't be a combination of the both.
That's true. Yeah, you would attempt to regain control of the aircraft, and you would use force if necessary.
Right.
If you're aware of it, and you would be aware of it.
So we don't have any indication. And the funny thing for me, and I'm sure you've thought about this too as well, it was the co-pilot that did the last radio transmission, the good night transmission. Mm-hmm. Is that a normal thing to say? I haven't heard anybody comment on this, but that to me sounds abnormal. Is that a normal way to just stop your transmission to a flight controller?
It's common to say good day or good morning or good afternoon or good evening, whatever is appropriate, when you're switching from one air traffic controller to another. Well, I'm not aware of what time of day it was that he made that transmission. Are you?
I think it was around 9 o'clock at night.
And that's not too unusual.
Okay.
No.
All right. I may have all of this took place at night. I think I don't have facts in front of me as I probably should. But nonetheless, I just thought good night and goodbye or whatever. It just seemed like a weird way, but you're saying that would be normal. Okay. Well, then that takes care of that. How do you, and again, you're looking at the same reports that the rest of the world is. We don't have much to go on, but
that's right.
They were originally, and I was feeling the common sense of them thinking that possibly they would head up into, towards India or, some other land and head north instead of south. Now they are focusing on Western Australia or west of Australia because of these 5 runways that were located on 5 islands on his flight simulator. Do you think that nobody knows anything? I look at it like the reason why I say it like that, and I'm not saying it in jest at all, but it seems like they were looking anywhere and everywhere like nobody had a serious clue about anything. But now it seems like they're zoning in a little bit on Western Australia. Do you think that that's enough to go on? Or do you think that they really don't know anything at all?
Well, it sounds to me like they can narrow it down somewhat with the satellite data they got. And that's only somewhat. And they'll have to, investigate all those possibilities. They'll have a good idea of where all the landing strips are that a 777 can land at. It's not just everywhere. It takes a fair amount of runway.
Mm-hmm.
And out in that neck of the woods, there's a lot of ocean. So if it has been commandeered and it is off to a safe landing at some runway, then there's only so many options. It's got a very long range with a full tank of gas,
right?
But it probably didn't have it was going, I think, a 6-hour flight,
right?
Get to Beijing. So probably not much more than what it would take to get to Beijing.
Okay,
would be on board.
Now I'm going to ask.
So they could narrow it down. They could narrow it down where the possible landing locations would be.
Okay, here's some aggressive questions. You, an experienced pilot, if you had to, could you land that thing on a 4,000-foot runway with full brakes and reverse thrusters and empty gas tanks and throwing everybody up the aisles? I mean, could you get it if you had to? Could you land it?
You can go pretty short. Maybe I'd have to look at the charts, but 4,000 is not could probably be done with a light airplane.
Okay.
And so that means pretty much burn up all your gas, and it's probably 4,000 or 5,000 feet. You could do that. Now getting off it again would be difficult with a full load.
Right. Do you need? And that was my next question. I'm glad you jumped right into it. Do you need more runway? I'm not a pilot. Okay, so I don't. Do you need more runway to take off, or do you need more runway to land? Or can you do it? Can you land and take off on the same strip?
I'd have to say that you off the top of my head that you'd need more to take off.
You need more to take off. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, you've been thinking about this for the last 14 days. I'm sure it's your job. What do you think? What's your theory? What's your best? If you were a betting man, what would you? What's your guess? What happened?
Well, the first thing I think about primarily before I speculate on, in public about this, is that there's 230 missing people, and they have family members that are worried about them.
Exactly.
And,
exactly.
So I'm hoping that in the end that it was just commandeered and they're going to be all right. I think that if an aircraft is going to be commandeered, it is helpful to have one of the flight crew, one of the pilots involved in it, because it's not these days. It's not as easy as it used to be to get into the cockpit.
Right.
If you're not supposed to be there.
Right.
And it is not, the first time. Say that's the case, that one of those guys is involved. It wouldn't be the first time that somebody's tried to do that. Even in the United States, a jump seating pilot tried to commandeer a FedEx airplane about 15 years ago, and crashed it into the Memphis sorting hub. And it was a fight in the cockpit that the person trying to take the airplane lost, and that prevented the aircraft from being taken over. And of course, it was about 10 years ago, Egypt Air Flight 767 out of New York.
Right.
One of the pilots waited for the other guy to go to the lavatory and then turned off the engines and crashed into the ocean. So these things are possible, and considering the fact that apparently the airplane was transmitting data for 6 hours,
right?
It sounds probably like somebody was flying it, and more likely than not, probably one of the original pilots, I would think. If you're asking me to guess.
Well, and I'm with you, and that's kind of the way my thought has been going. I can't believe with the amount of ocean currents and the amount of shipping lanes that are out there and traffic and the search efforts that have been going on, that not one single piece of debris has been found. And after a massive search, not after a couple of days, but after a couple of weeks, nothing has surfaced. Nobody has found one thing. And plenty of things on that plane can float and float forever. So that's the one thing where I think the plane landed somewhere.
Well, if it crashed into the ocean, then there should have been a signal coming from its emergency locator beacon, which should have deployed automatically. And furthermore, there wouldn't have been a situation where you've lost communications, yet the airplane is apparently still airborne and functioning based on radio signals it's transmitting. So I don't think it crashed. At least I don't think it crashed either.
Yeah, I don't. I think we're going to be shocked when we eventually find out what really happened and what the intentions were. And let's just hope it's not airborne again, if you know what I mean. That's so, not to speculate into anything dark. I'm just saying no debris, no traces of anything anywhere, no emergency anything, nothing, not a life raft, nothing. Says to me that plane is on the ground somewhere.
Well, I would think that many folks would be interested in finding out, and they're probably looking right now because they'd be worried about the same things you're talking about. What is it intended to be used for?
Right.
And what happened to those 230 people?
Right. And before we go there, let's just, let's try to, make sure that we save some lives and make sure that everybody is safe and sound. Again, that's my good side, and that's the way I look at it. Hey, John, thank you for coming on, and maybe I can catch you in between flights, and we'll get you on when this whole thing resolves. Is that cool?
Pleasure to be on your show. Thanks a lot.
All right. Thank you very much. Be safe out there.
Okay. Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye. Wow. Okay. We're going to take a quick break. When I come back, Richard Sauder will be with us from Ecuador. This is Fade to Black on the Dark Matter Radio Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Trying to figure that out, man. That's a veteran right there. That is a real pilot. Giving it to you straight, too. Be back right after this.
Way out here, we listen to Jimmy Church on the Dark Matter Radio Network.
Dark Matter.
Dark Matter. Dark Matter. Dark Matter. Dark Matter.
You're listening to Fade to Black
on the Dark Matter Radio Network.
¿Qué tal, mis amigos? Yo soy Mario Carson, el tiburón, y los invito para que escuchen a mi buen amigo Jimmy Church Radio. ¡Claro que sí!
Oi, I'm Reese Evans. You're listening to Jimmy Church. This is Revolution. The revolution will not be televised. The revolution is on radio. Ciao.
Fade to Black on the Dark Matter Radio Network. And I'm just going to say this right now. Sitting in for Art Bell, working for Keith, has his privileges. And one of those is my next guest. And being able to have shows put together for everyone out there like this. It is indeed an honor. Keep the emails coming. Jimmy at jimmychurchradio.com. If you have any questions for the good doctor who will be on here in just a second, get them lined up. I've got a few right now, and we'll try to get as many in as we can. Here we go. Let's go. Dr. Richard Sauder was the first person systematically to popularize the mysterious topic of underground and then underwater bases and tunnels by delving into open literature of the government, military, and the industry paper trail. He is the author of several books, including Hidden in Plain Sight, Beyond the X-Files, his most recent work. He's also published Underwater and Underground Bases, which expands the scope of his earlier work to include military plans for manned bases and tunnels beneath the sea floor. I'd like to welcome, live from Ecuador, Dr. Richard Sauder. Doctor, are you with us, sir?
Thank you, Jimmy. I'm glad to be here.
Sorry for the little hiccup on your intro. It's called Late Night and Starbucks, and it's a vicious combination. But welcome to the program.
Thank you, Jimmy. I'm glad to be here.
Now, a couple of things. Let's just get out of my standard stuff. I'm just gonna get a couple of things out of the way. This is a conversation between a couple of friends sitting in my living room, even though we're separated by, 5,000-6,000 miles. But your audio sounds great, by the way. And so we're just sitting in my living room having a conversation, and we'll see where it goes. And we have a lot of stuff to cover tonight. And with you, one of the great things about a guest like you is we can go in just about any direction, and I'm going to be speaking with somebody that knows the subject, and I like to think that I do, but I'm here to learn, and if it's interesting, then it's going to be interesting to everybody else. So, are you ready?
I am ready, Jimmy.
Before I'm going to ask you something ridiculous. What time is it right now in Ecuador?
9:37 p.m.
Okay, so even though you're tremendously south, you're not really that far east of us, and it's not too bad. It's not like you're in Ghana or Africa. It's just South America, so it's not that far. I guess it just seems weird. You're more south. You and I were talking before the show today, and I lived in Panama. And Panama also is, that's even more centralized to the United States. So you're almost on the same time zone as everybody else when you call to the States, but you're so far away. So
it's a different region of the world, and I'm happy to be here.
The technology is an amazing thing, because I have to tell you, we just had on a pilot to talk about the Malaysian missing plane. And I almost said crash, but the missing plane.
Why don't we say the allegedly missing plane?
Yeah, the allegedly missing plane, exactly. And he's in San Diego, and we're up here in Burbank. We're separated by 100 miles, and he didn't sound as clear as you do right now. That's fantastic. That's just amazing. So okay, now. Before we get headlong and headfirst into this, you were the guy that everybody else, including myself, has always looked to for information and facts and stuff on underground bases. But what led you into that? Was there something that happened? Were you privy to some kind of information? Was some hat tip somewhere, or were you just going off of maybe a couple of crazy reports out there and then started to follow into it? How did you get into it?
I never thought about it at all until about 1989, when I moved to the Southwest to pursue my PhD in political science, which I did obtain, by the way. And when I arrived in the Southwest for the first time, I heard people talking about alleged secret underground facilities that were jointly operated by purported little gray extraterrestrials and clandestine factions of the USA military-industrial complex. I thought those stories were very peculiar. It was a subject that was new to me. And these were not people, these were just people I met in the course of my everyday life. It was more a part of their culture and lore in the Southwest and in other parts of the country. And I was living in the United States at that time, of course. And so I just listened to some of those stories and didn't know what to think. When I finished my comprehensive exams for the PhD, I had a little more breathing room as I was working on my thesis to look into this. So I began to do a little bit of research. And just through doing a routine literature search, going through some scientific and engineering and industrial journals, government reports and documents, open source materials such as Look Magazine, for example, Popular Mechanics, and a variety of books that could be accessed through the card catalog at a large university. I found that indeed there were some underground facilities that could be publicly identified and that had been discussed to a certain extent in the open literature, such as Mount Weather in Northern Virginia, the NORAD base under Cheyenne Mountain in Colorado, and some facilities such as those. So a Site R on the border between Pennsylvania and Maryland in the Mid-Atlantic region of the United States. So I wrote up a short article to that effect and published it in UFO Magazine, which recently became defunct, but at that time was a thriving UFO magazine being published out of Los Angeles, California by Don Ecker and Vicki Cooper. And in the article, which appeared in the first week of November, about 1991, something like that, I said that while I couldn't say anything about purported little gray aliens underground, that there certainly were, and we might say still are, serious underground facilities that could be buried fairly deeply, were technologically complex and sophisticated, that were large, that could accommodate hundreds or even a couple thousand people in some degree of creature comfort deep underground. And the article came out, as I said, in November of that year, and I thought at that point that I had exhausted the topic. So several weeks later, over the holidays, the week between Christmas and New Year's, I guess this was 1992, November, December 1992. So the last week of December of 1992, I was awakened out of a deep sleep in the middle of the night, weird hours of the morning, maybe 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. And I didn't know why I had awakened. I was laying in bed. Everything was very quiet in the neighborhood where I was living. There was no noise in my little apartment. I lived in a little apartment on a quiet alley. And I was extremely relaxed, but mentally alert. And all of a sudden, I heard the voice of a man speaking in my ear in a very calm, matter-of-fact way. The sensation was like listening to, you know, how years ago kids would listen to a transistor radio, and there was a little earpiece that you fit in your ear.
Right, the one earpiece, not the fancy,
not the 2 earbuds you have today.
Right.
But the effect would be similar to just having one earbud in your ear today. But in those days, they had little plastic earpieces that you stuck in your ear, and you heard the voice of the announcer, or whatever, in your inner ear, so to speak. Well, it was very much that kind of effect. I heard this man talking to me. It was the voice of an adult male Caucasian, speaking normally accented, educated, late 20th century North American English.
Let me stop you there for a second, because I get the visual. Did you open your eyes? Did you try? What I mean is, did you verify that there wasn't somebody standing there?
There was no need to. There was no one in the room.
Okay.
I was completely alone.
You understand the question?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
But there was no one there.
Right,
Well, my
right. Okay.
my cat was there.
Right.
But what he said to me was very interesting. His opening line was very calm, matter of fact. He said to me, "The underground bases are real." Immediately, I understood what he was talking about, and I also understood immediately that I was being communicated to via a non-conventional technology. I just understood all of this intuitively, instantly, within a fraction of less than 1 second. It was clear to me that I was not hearing the voice of an angel, a demon, a discarnate spirit, that I wasn't losing my mind. I understood instantly that a flesh and blood man was speaking to me using some kind of electronics that was broadcasting directly to my inner ear or the auditory cortex of my brain. I just knew that instantly, intuitively.
Did you feel for maybe a split second that you were, going crazy, or maybe
never, not even for 1/100th of a second.
And
never.
And then what?
I instantly understood what was going on. So he said that, and then he proceeded to, for a brief period, no more than 3 minutes, inform me that indeed there are these vast underground bases. And as he spoke, I got a vivid mental image of what he was talking about. And I saw, like in my mind's eye, these vast cavernous underground spaces full of cutting-edge sci-fi like technology, which I couldn't really describe with any technical specificity, only to say that I was seeing advanced technology, and that there were people down there a lot. These were big programs and projects, and as he was talking, he was conveying to me that these facilities exist. They are big. They're deeply buried. There are multiple numbers of them that most people don't know that they're down there. Remember, this was 1992, 22 years ago, before I had written my books, before I did numerous interviews, wrote magazine articles, had published articles to the internet, etc.
Right.
And so this is nearly a quarter of a century ago. And
doctor,
the point he was making to me was that this is a reality that's out of sight, out of mind. It's massive. It's high tech. It's massively funded. It's extremely secret. There are a lot of people involved. As he spoke, it was clear to me that there's technology involved, like maybe literally out of this world, but certainly really powerful and sophisticated. There are a lot of people involved. There are companies involved. There are government agencies involved.
And
it's compartmentalized. It's secret. And then he stopped.
Well, hold on, doctor. I have a very important question, though. But
yes.
we're going to stay on this and get as deep as we can. But was this? Do you think it was a direct communication from somebody, possibly electronic or telepathic?
That's what I'm telling you.
Okay.
Using what is called psychotronic means, and I talk in my book Kundalini Tales, which is now out of print, may go back into print later this year or next. But I reproduced a patent in Kundalini Tales, an extensive appendix to that brief book, which frankly is a brain transmitter, and uses pulsed microwaves to transmit intelligible sound directly to the auditory cortex of a mammalian brain. And in the patent specifications, they actually had a schematic diagram of which mammalian brain they made by giving you a nice profile of a human being, a human head.
Right.
So the technology in that patent was actually from the late 1970s or something like that. The technology to transmit directly electronically to the human brain has been around for at least the last few decades, maybe since World War II, and possibly even before then, but at least since the World War II and immediate post-World War II period. It's not science fiction, it's not magic, it is nuts and bolts electronic fact.
Are they able to, is it both audio and video? I mean, or because you were saying you got visions
I haven't
too.
seen patents for the video,
Right.
but I believe that capability does exist.
Sure.
Now, subsequently to that, of course, I woke up the next morning and I remembered very well what had happened during the night. And I decided, if what this guy had told me is true, which I suspect it was, there's got to be a paper trail, because the impression I got as he was talking was, my God, the scope of this is huge. Not only the facilities themselves are large, but there's just a lot of people involved, a lot of technology. These are major projects and programs. There's a vast amount of money involved here. And I just knew, because I was working on a PhD in political science, and I know something about bureaucracies, whether they're openly public or secret. Bureaucracies generate paper, documents, records, memoranda, et cetera, et cetera. So I thought to myself, can this be true? And if it is, there's got to be a paper trail. So I went, and I spent a period of years to archives, to major university libraries, to government document repositories. I talked to numerous people all across the social and political and professional spectrum, in the government and out, in the military and out, et cetera. And I found out, indeed, there is a paper trail, and I reproduce a lot of it in my books. And
I just want to let everybody.
I can now say with 100% confidence, indeed, there are many underground installations, including secret underground facilities. They can be quite large, technologically sophisticated, deeply buried, and highly secret. So what the man told me was true. And in fact, some years later, while doing my research, I was interviewing a source, and most of my sources have never been named. Most of them don't want to be named, and I respect that. But I was interviewing a source at an unnamed location, and in the middle of the conversation, because I had mentioned publicly a number of times what had happened to me in the night that spurred my research, he point blank asked me. He said to me, "Was it my voice that spoke to you in your ear?"
Excuse me? Really?
Yeah. So I had to tell him, frankly, because it had been some years. At that point, it had been about 5 years or 5.5 years. I had to tell him, frankly, that I couldn't be sure, because but I can tell you, I interpreted that as meaning that it very possibly was him. He was certainly someone, and I've talked to a whole list of individuals with technical backgrounds who've been in compartmentalized projects, including underground, who have spent years, even decades, working with or for a variety of alphabet soup agencies. So he's an individual who certainly would have been in a position to access any unconventional technology that might exist in the military-industrial complex.
Did the voice?
So, I'm prepared to believe that it may have been him.
Doctor, was that the only time that the voice did communicate with you?
Yes.
That was the first
time.
and only time. Okay. So did you? Next question is a real one. Did the voice ever speak to you a second time in the future? Has it spoken to you since?
That's what I'm telling you. It spoke to me that one time.
That's it.
Period.
Okay. What about so you didn't get any guidance to point you in the direction to the paper trail, or maybe a couple of clues?
I did, In fact, I did get guidance. And the guidance was that I'm not a stupid man.
Right.
And I understood that due to the scope of what was being presented to me, and because of what I know of bureaucracies, any bureaucracy is going to generate records, documents, memoranda, reports, etc. And I knew, because of the scope of what was being downloaded to me mentally, that some of it had to fall through the cracks. Absolutely had to. and that it would be out there if I would go and look. I knew that because of the way the real world is. And in fact, that's exactly the fact that is the case. That's the way it is. I'm also prepared to admit that I only found the proverbial tip of the iceberg in what my research has revealed. However, what I've shown in my research in and of itself is eye-opening.
What was your thesis? Or when you got your doctorate, were you getting more into the underground? What was your thesis based on? That's a
mortgage loan analysis. It was not related even tangentially.
Well, no, the reason. Well, this is why I'm asking. Did you keep your research clandestine? Were you discussing it with friends? Because
I had problems.
Yeah,
I had problems.
Sure.
I had problems, but I stayed out of jail, so I guess it was okay. I never did go into the rough headwinds I've had to buck, but yes, I got the PhD, but I had a fight to defend myself.
Yeah, I can only imagine, and plus it's something that you have to believe in it. But it's something that you just can't.
Well, you know what? That's more than 20 years in the past now. So for me, that's almost ancient history. That's a third of a lifetime ago.
Okay, now
and there's so much more going on nowadays.
Yeah. So with let's see here. Okay, before we head into any type of break, have you been able to visit any sites for the? I mean, of course you have, the Archuleta stuff in Dulce.
That's misinformation.
That's
misinformation, and I don't want to go into that on this program because it is misinformation. Why don't we concentrate on factual installations that are known to exist instead of going down a rabbit hole that's been put there to purposefully mislead people?
Exactly. And there's a new documentary that's coming out. It's called Mirage Men. And you can actually go and check out the trailer at jimmychurchradio.com. But it focuses on that entire story about how Doty and
well, I don't even want to waste our time talking about fairy tales
and
known misinformation agents.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say. And it is a crazy, crazy story. And for those out there that think that Dulce could be real, when you go and you see this documentary and you just see how it really went down, it's first off, it makes you angry. That's the first thing. And the second, it's also a sad story.
Well, in my opinion, why should we waste any more time talking about waste any more bandwidth on a fairy tale?
I couldn't have said it better myself. I did want to touch on one thing really quick.
What's that?
You with deep sea, the undersea bases. There, I had a few guests on, so I just wanted to ask you about this directly.
Yes.
Up and down the California coast here, I've probably had more than a handful of guests talk about experiences, visions, and visits to bases that are underground on the California coast, and I'm specifically
undersea or underground.
Undersea. I'm sorry, undersea.
Yes.
Off the California coast, in between Monterey and Marina del Rey and the Catalina Islands. That whole area. What can you say about that? I mean, because
I can. Why don't we just cut it right there, and I'll tell you what I can say. Number one, already starting in the mid 1960s, circa 1966. The United States Navy began an R&D program on manned undersea bases operating out of the China Lake Naval Weapons Station, which is in the desert in South Central or in Central California. And also the Stanford Research Institute, which at that time was affiliated with Stanford University, and now, at least officially is not, also did some preliminary R&D work on the concept of manned undersea bases. So that was being there was active R&D work on manned undersea bases in the United States military-industrial complex already beginning in the mid-1960s. One of the places that the rock site research in coming out of China, like Naval Weapons Station, was focusing on was the Channel Islands region off the coast of California. That wasn't the only region, but that was one of the areas. One of the ways you can make an undersea base is to take an island, whether it's a coastal island like the Channel Islands off the California coast,
right,
or an island further out to sea like Bermuda maybe, or Puerto Rico, just two possible examples, or the Hawaiian Islands. And you can drill a shaft or a tunnel down on land on the island, but then tunnel out under the sea, beneath the seafloor, beginning on land. And you can tunnel as far as your tunnel boring machines will take you, 2 miles, 20 miles, or 220 miles. It just depends what your objective is. But the technology of drilling or excavating a tunnel, once you get down beneath the seafloor in the bedrock, is very similar to what you would do if you were on land. In both cases, you're in an enclosed environment, hundreds or thousands of feet beneath the surface in the solid rock. So the fact that above you there's water is not really a germane concern, as long as the water does not break through into the tunnel. And if the tunnel is well sealed, usually it will not. So the technology to do that has been around literally for the last half century at least. Now, I've been told quietly that some of these bases have been made. One of the locations that's been mentioned to me more than once is the Gulf of Mexico, off the southern coast of the United States. And I know from my extensive research of the literature that these facilities could be made literally anywhere in the world. I go into this in some depth, pardon the pun, please,
right,
in my book Hidden in Plain Sight, Beyond the X-Files. The Navy, actually, there's the Navy's chief research scientist for their undersea program, undersea warfare program during the height of the Cold War, was John Pena Craven. He was a World War II veteran, and he was tasked with developing the capability for the United States Navy to work at and carry out operations at depths as deep as 20,000 feet, shades of Jules Verne, 20,000 leagues beneath the sea.
Right.
But that was what he was tasked with back in the 1960s. His term of service was between about the mid to late 50s and the early to mid 1970s. He was the Navy's chief undersea warfare research scientist.
How large?
He was tasked with this.
How large, Dr. Sauder? How large are these bases? Do you have any idea what we're talking
Which
about?
bases?
You mentioned the one in the Gulf of Mexico.
Well, let me tell you what I saw in the literature.
Okay.
As I got into this research into the underwater bases, I was doing of course, I've been doing interviews for the last 20 years approximately on this topic and others. But one of my interviews was on a well-known network radio program in the United States. And after the show, I was contacted by Walter Kirshner, who was worked for years as an illustrator for a number of military programs. And he was tasked in the 1960s to be the official illustrator for the Navy's rock site program, which was their research and development program for manned undersea bases. And he produced a series of illustrations. And he contacted me and said, I was an illustrator for this program back in the 1960s. And Walt frankly told me, I can't tell you if the bases were built. I can only tell you that the Navy came to me and gave him some design specifications that said, illustrate this. Now, this is what we want to do, illustrate this. So he did. And I reproduce a number of those illustrations in my book. And I can tell you that what the Navy was researching, designing already back in 1966 were bases undersea and mid-ocean with airlocks that could accommodate ocean-going Navy submarines like Polaris ballistic missile firing, nuclear missile firing submarines, which are large submarines. They're like 300-400 feet long and 60, 70, 80 feet tall, including the conning tower, maybe more, maybe 90 or 100 feet.
Mm-hmm.
So they are very large ocean-going vessels. And the Navy was designing and researching the construction of bases that could accommodate not just one ballistic missile firing submarine, but some of the designs I saw, they were bases that could accommodate 3, 4 submarines or even more, plus their crews with living quarters and everything like that in large bases mid-sea. I'm presuming they've done that. And now when I read, that these submarines go away to sea for half a year and they're patrolling 1,000 feet beneath the waves, just circling around out there for 6 months at a time, I'm thinking,
right?
Really?
Yeah.
How do we know?
Yeah.
How do we know? They just don't go to an undersea base in mid-ocean and park there for 5 months. And then after 5 months, the captain says, okay, guys, put the ping pong rackets away,
right?
Ping pong paddles away. It's time to go back to base. And I say ping pong paddles because what I saw in his illustrations was, that was already designed back in the 1960s, recreation areas in these undersea bases for guys to play ping pong, watch television, sit on a lounge chair and read a magazine or a book. So I'm presuming they've done this.
What would be the purpose? I mean, I could think of all kinds of dark and light reasons to undersea bases of that size, but what do you think the purpose is for the Navy?
Well, I can tell you one of them that's explicitly discussed, both in John Pena Craven's book, which was called, if I'm recalling correctly, Silent War. It was his very heavily edited and censored memoirs of the basically 2-decade period he spent as a Navy's chief research scientist. He headed some extremely secret programs at the height of the Cold War in a deep sea environment. And he recounts an anecdote where he was he worked, of course, with the best and the brightest in the military-industrial complex, including Edward Teller, who's the father of the H-bomb and hydrogen bomb. And Edward Teller came to him and requested that he build nuclear missile silos in the ocean floor, thousands of feet down. And because there's such great crushing pressure at depth when you get out to the deep ocean environment, it's a fact that structurally you do not want to build deep undersea structures with steel. You want to build them with glass, pure glass, because at great depth, when you get down thousands of feet, glass is structurally far stronger than steel. And so the idea was that Teller and he were kicking around was to build nuclear missile fields well out to sea, but the nuclear missile silos would be made of solid glass. And I also found this mentioned in the illustrations of Walter Kirshner. One of his illustrations depicted an undersea, manned undersea base, and with a berth for a Polaris nuclear missile firing submarine, which was the United States Navy's first generation of nuclear submarines that could fire ballistic missiles from undersea. This was back in the late 50s, early 60s, up until about the mid 60s. And so it had a berth for a Polaris submarine to come in. It also had some some caverns for the crew and for equipment. And then it had a shaft going straight down to a subsea tunnel network that connected to a series of nuclear missile silos embedded in the seafloor. So I saw that referenced in John Pena Craven's book. I also saw it in the artwork of Walter Kirshner. So that was clearly a concept that was part of the Navy's research and design all the way back in the mid-'60s. And then it was also referenced in the Stanford Research Institute's working paper on research and design of manned underground undersea facilities, that one possible use would be to house nuclear missiles undersea. So in 3 separate sources, I saw this mentioned that the United States military was planning this or thinking about it, discussing it. I'm presuming it has been done.
Here's a quick email. I'm surprised that we didn't touch upon this earlier, but just came in. Hey, Jimmy, another super guest. There you go, Doctor. It says, let me skip over this. Please ask Richard about his thoughts on Phil Schneider and if he was murdered.
I don't know if Phil was murdered. I believe he was killed. I don't know. Phil, I actually talked to Phil a couple of times on the telephone. He promised he was going to. I told him, frankly, your story is sensational. What proof is there of it beyond your say-so? He said, well, I have boxes of documentation. And I told him, I want to see it. I'm from Missouri. I got to see some proof.
Right.
For me,
yes.
For me, you're a voice on the telephone with a melodramatic story. So, you got to show me something. And he said, okay, I'll send you documentation. He never did send me anything. And then he was killed subsequent to that, or died, or anyway, he appears to be dead under unpleasant circumstances. And so I have to say about Phil Schneider, there's a huge question mark in my mind. And then in subsequent statements between the time we talked and then he didn't send me any documentation, just didn't send me even one scrap of, not even a letter. And then later on he turned up dead. But he was, in his public talks, was misrepresenting me as having worked in secret underground programs. That's not true. And that I was a PhD architect. That's also false. I've never worked in the architecture field. I don't have any professional or academic credentials in architecture. I love good architecture, but I'm not credentialed professionally in architecture. And so he misrepresented me factually.
Now, did he ask?
Statements.
Did Phil ask you about your credentials, or did he read this or hear this somewhere else?
I told him. No, he couldn't have read it anywhere else because there is no other source, whether me or anybody else saying that, but him.
Right.
What I'm telling you is, if Phil Schneider represented something that fundamental, that I had worked in secret programs underground for the alphabet soup, and I never have. Period. Never have. So that statement by him is flatly false. And also that I'm a PhD architect. That I have a PhD, but at the time we talked, I didn't. But I do have a PhD now, but it's not in architecture. I've never been involved in any academic or professional way with architecture. So those two statements, which he made publicly about me, which certainly I did not tell him, were both completely factually incorrect. They are false statements. So that caused him, if he could do that with my personal details, then how much of the rest of what he's saying is also factually incorrect, you see?
Well, and then you go and you die in the fashion that he did with, there's question marks all the way around it. Then you become a martyr.
Well, maybe I don't know who Phil was involved with.
Right.
And if the truth is a slippery commodity for Phil, and I don't know that, but I'm saying in my case it was, because he flatly got my personal details wrong, 100% wrong. And so if he couldn't get that right, then what else was he getting wrong who else was upset with him. I mean, I'm not the kind of person that's going to strangle you because you misrepresent my professional credentials.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
that's not me.
Sure,
but I'm not everyone.
Yeah, I don't.
Someone was upset with Phil Schneider. I don't know who that person was or persons. I don't know why, and I don't know the extent of Phil's interaction with them or not. I mean, I just couldn't say.
Right.
More than that, I can't say.
Well, back then, before the internet like it is today, but back then with Phil, vetting somebody or trying to find out somebody's true credentials was a difficult thing to do. So
I couldn't tell you anything more about Phil than that, so
Yeah.
we'll have to move on.
Okay. Well, I just find his death completely suspicious.
Well, it is. But, people get murdered every day. And just because someone is killed, it doesn't mean they were involved in a secret government program.
Okay, there you go. And that was a great question, and that came in from Damon. Appreciate that, Damon. Now, let's move on. I want to get in. We have. Oh, by the way, everybody out there, we are talking to Dr. Richard Sauder, and his excellent, by the way, blog, which I read regularly, it's called the Event Horizon Chronicle. If you go to jimmychurchradio.com, and there's a link right there. Click on the doctor's name right there on the homepage, and it'll take you straight over to Event Horizon Chronicle and read it, and read it often. It is well done. And
I would add to that I've been at this for a number of years, and there's a lot of information in past blog posts going back through the years, a lot of factual information. And in fact, it amounts to a decent sized book if you take it in its entirety, and it's there.
There's a lot of stuff here. Yes,
it's there to be read for free.
It's an excellent blog. Now, which we have so many, and I'm sure you heard the opening to the show today. In the last since the Olympics, since the Winter Olympics ended, it seems like we've planet Earth, it's just kind of like gone a little bit wacko. We were on autopilot for so long, leading up to this. Everything just seemed consistent. Excuse me. We had our typical, North Korean, flare up, rant, once a year, or, some little skirmish in the Middle East or whatever, little thing. But now things have gotten a little crazy in the last, 14 days with this Malaysian 777 thing. Of course, the dust up in Syria. And now we've got some serious Cold War hijinks going on with this Crimea thing. And you cover this, very well, by the way. And I like what you wrote on the 14th. Really good. But is that do you feel, you're down there in Ecuador. What can you feel it down there? Can you feel what I'm talking about?
No, not so much in Ecuador, because a lot of the melodrama that is occurring in the world is caused by the United States or the corporation, the imperial corporation called the United States government, and its associated agencies like the so-called United States Federal Reserve Bank, the big Wall Street companies like J.P. Morgan and the huge Fortune 500 corporations, General Electric, et cetera, et cetera. So here in the periphery of the world system, and you are in the periphery, as social scientists say, in Latin America and Africa and in most of Asia, you're in the periphery to the world system. You don't get as much of this big power histrionics. Ecuador is affected very much by what the United States does and says and by its policies. But since Ecuador is not the United States, neither is Uruguay, et cetera, Bolivia, the direct impact is not felt here with the immediacy that it would be for someone living in Western Europe or the United States. But of course, the newspapers newspapers do have headlines, and there's coverage on the television news about what's happening in other parts of the world. So in that regard, yes, there is some sense of what's happening, but it doesn't quite have the immediacy that it would if you were living, say, in Washington, D.C. or New York or Chicago, etc. Now, having said that, we are entering into and are now in an inflection point in history. In going back over the last few thousand years, I can mention a couple of or three major inflection points. One would be, of course, the fall or disintegration of the Roman Empire, round about the period between approximately 400 AD and 500 or 550 AD. It was kind of slow motion compared to the way things happen today. But remember, in those days, if you were going to sail, it was people used sails, or they had Roman galleys and they had slaves, and they rowed in Roman galleys, or if you wanted to take a horse cart or an ox cart. So things moved a lot more slowly then. Nowadays, we have internet, radio, telephones, television, jet airplanes, so everything moves much faster in today's world. Plus, there are not 10 times more people, probably 70 times more people, 100 times more people in the world than there were then. So the sheer crush of the population and the greater sophistication and speed of technology means that things happen faster today and with greater global impact than they did 1,500 years ago. So that was one historical inflection, very important to change the course of history. Another big inflection was in the late 1400s, when Columbus allegedly discovered the Western Hemisphere, the Americas, the islands in the Caribbean, North and South America. Of course, this was known before, but that was sort of like the official announcement to the great unwashed masses that, oh yeah, there are large populated land masses on the other side of the sea. And then you had the beginning of the European period of exploration and conquest. And now you have nations in their own right on this side of the ocean that are in communication with the other continents. Of course, there were millions of people living in the Americas when Columbus arrived, so he didn't discover anything. What he did do was open the way for conquest and plunder by the European colonial powers. And that they did with a vengeance over the next 200 or 300 years until the so-called wars of liberation, independence in the late 18th century and early 19th century in the American colonies of the European imperial powers. So that was another big historical inflection point, late 1400s, early 1500s, when you had the collision between old world societies in Europe and the so-called New World in the Americas and the Caribbean. And now we're at a point where we're moving into another great inflection point in history where there's tremendous competition between a block that we could roughly call the BRICS block. The block is built of bricks: Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. In other words, the East and the South. And then Israel, NATO, United States, Canada, Australia, Japan would be in the other block. So you roughly have one half of humanity against, or more, maybe 70% of humanity against the other 30%. And there's a great contest for dominion of the planet from this point going forward. That's a gross simplification, of course, but I think in stark outline, you could make a case that that's what's going down. And what remains to be seen is whether Western Europe, so-called Old Europe, United States, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and Japan continue to lord it over the rest of the world technologically, politically, financially, as they have for the last centuries, or whether a new kind of power dynamic more broadly based across the planet is going to come to the fore and hold sway.
Well, what
This
would
is a-
be
this is a great
that
contest.
what would be that new power dynamic? Because I would think
Well,
Bitcoin.
Bitcoin is part of that. Let me finish. You asked the question. Let me finish.
Well, I didn't get to ask my question.
But what would be the new power dynamic? That's the question. That's the kernel of the
Because
question.
we are already the new power dynamic. We already control agriculture. We control the money. We control just about everything. The United States and NATO and the free world. China is an individual element, but Russia isn't in control of anything close to what we're importing and exporting dollar wise.
First of all, your use of the word "we" is particular to you. I am not going to say "we" because I don't identify with that system.
Okay.
And if you listen carefully to what I just said, there are two major contending power blocks on the planet today: the nascent BRICS power block, which I just enumerated.
Right.
Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. Roughly, with some exceptions, of course, the East and the South. And the other power pole, which is, roughly speaking, North America, the United States, Canada, old Europe, Australia, New Zealand, in other words, the remnants of the British Empire, and Japan. And those are the two major contending power blocks on the planet today. The question is whether we will continue to have domination by the Fortune 500 or Fortune 1000 based in that power block of old Europe, the United States, Canada, Australia, Japan, as we have had for most of the last century and even going back for most of the last 500 years, or whether this other power block will come more to the fore. And part and parcel of that is a nascent movement toward greater decentralization. In fact, in his own way, Putin has been saying that by emphasizing that a unipolar model of the world is not appropriate, that a multipolar model of the world is more appropriate, and that is what he has been advocating just that plainly in recent years. Now, along with that, such new technologies as Bitcoin or the so-called cryptocurrencies, for example, or altcoins, has been surging to the fore just in the last 3 or 4 years. The old power block has been trying to squelch that, just as the gold market is rigged, the bond market is rigged, silver is rigged, everything is rigged by the big banking houses and the influential central banks like the Bank of England, the United States Federal Reserve Bank, European Central Bank. They are trying to rig the whole entire global economy to their favor. That's one part of this power struggle. The other part of the power struggle is Gaddafi, in his own way in Africa, was trying to establish a currency called the dinar based on gold. The Chinese have been importing gold by the hundreds of tons. And Iran has been trading its petroleum for gold on the international market, et cetera. So that's another part of the power dynamic, this tension between so-called fiat currencies issued by the central banks, which I just mentioned, are figure prominently in that scenario, and others, including in the Muslim world. Gaddafi would be an example, and he was killed because of that. Or the Iranians are another example. The Chinese, as I mentioned, are stockpiling huge amounts of gold, just obtaining it any way they can. And this paper empire in the United States, in Europe, in Japan, et cetera, is creaking and groaning and teetering, and in my opinion, is subject to catastrophic failure perhaps later this year, perhaps even beginning next month in April. And when that happens, those who have the gold, remember the old axiom, those who have the gold make the rules, because for thousands of years, gold and silver have been considered to have value, intrinsic value, and monetary wealth has been determined by those who have silver and gold. there is no more gold to speak of in the United States or in Britain.
There's no question, and I'm 100% with you and behind you when you talk about gold and silver and those types of commodities.
So
but that's exactly. But hold on.
The BRICS are positioning themselves for this collapse. And the second part of my answer is, along with this decentralization, global decentralization is arising. This new phenomenon of the cryptocurrencies, foremost of which is Bitcoin, and notwithstanding what the mainstream news media are saying in the so-called developed world, the Bitcoin market and the Bitcoin infrastructure and the related infrastructure of now scores, something like 80 or more other cryptocurrencies and growing every month or more, is expanding, gaining more and more market share bit by bit, all internationally. So we are right now at a really powerful inflection point. And the way I see it playing out is that
I have to stop you, Doctor. I have to stop you right there. You can't have it both ways. You can't say that gold, our paper money is worthless. Gold is, which is fine. Well, so is Bitcoin. There's nothing backing Bitcoin, and Bitcoin eventually is going to be worth exactly what it was when it started, zero, because there's nothing backing Bitcoin or any other cryptocurrency.
Well, let's talk about that. You made a flat assertion which may not be true.
There's gold backing Bitcoin? No, there's not. Well, I'm fascinated with Bitcoin. I am fascinated with it.
No, I have not said. All I have said about Bitcoin is that it is decentralized, nothing more.
But it's not backed by any commodity either.
That's for my purposes right now. That's not relevant. With a currency, listen, let me finish.
Okay, go ahead.
With any currency, all that matters is that the two parties to the transaction, no matter what it is, accept that whatever they're using as a medium of exchange suffices according to the terms of their contract, whether it's verbal, a handshake, implicit, whether there's a legal contract, whatever, that both parties accept it for the purpose of their exchange, it has value.
Yeah, a perception of value. Exactly.
That's all that matters. Now, it could be an idea, and some ideas are very powerful and very valuable. There are ideas that are immensely valuable, but you can't see them. They're just imaginary. They don't even consist of a stream of electrons. But I think you would agree that some ideas are extremely valuable. So to say that, well, it's not tangible, therefore it doesn't have any value, not true. Perceptions themselves have value. And what we can say is that if enough people attach value to something, it has value. If enough people decide something has no value, then indeed it doesn't. And the United States dollar has arrived at that point. More and more people have decided that it has either very little value, or soon maybe even have no value, or that while it may have value, they prefer not to use it because there is something else that serves their purposes better. And we're at that point. So I'm not going to dispute that, Bitcoin is just an entry in a digital database. True, that's true. However, speaking about Bitcoin, only a finite number of Bitcoins have been produced. As of now, I think there are about 10 million Bitcoins total.
And it's got a cap of 21 million. After that, no more Bitcoins will be made.
No more. After that, you will just divide Bitcoins into smaller and smaller slices.
Mm-hmm.
That is, if you like, the polar opposite of the model that the central banks have, which are producing their currencies by the multi-trillions. There's an interesting video that I reference in one or two of my blog postings of United States Congressional Representative Alan Grayson from Florida, questioning the Inspector General Coleman of the United States Federal Reserve Bank before Congress. This is just about 3 years ago or so. And he's questioning her about the disposition of some $9 trillion on the United States Federal Reserve ledger. And she either cannot or will not tell him in a sworn testimony anything about those multiple trillions of dollars. And as Inspector General, she is specifically tasked by charter with auditing the Federal Reserve Bank's books. So you try that out. If a government agency calls you in for an audit of your financial affairs, they're going to quiz you about $10, $20.
Right.
Here she's begging total ignorance about $9 trillion. That is the way that these people operate, and yet they will hold you to an exacting standard on the pain of imprisonment that they do not hold themselves to. On the contrary, it's a totally different standard where they act with impunity and shovel between themselves. They shovel around not just millions or hundreds of millions, not mere billions or even hundreds of billions, but trillions of dollars.
How many Bitcoins do you own yourself?
Well, I don't have multiple Bitcoins. At present, I have a fraction of a Bitcoin.
You have a fraction.
Yes, and I struggled to get that.
It's tough.
But the point of that's not the point of this interview.
Well, no,
I don't have a major financial investment in Bitcoin. However, I think that it has Bitcoin or something like it.
But there you hit the nail on the head right there. And that's my issue with Bitcoin. You just said it for myself and for everybody else. It's not an investment. And people cannot look at Bitcoins as an investment, long-term, short-term, any term.
It's a different model of economics.
It's money. That's what it is. And you can't look at it other than that. And if people...
It's a medium of exchange.
That's it. It's a medium of exchange. But you just said investment. And that is that for every but hold on, now let me finish. Wait a minute. My point is that's the way that everybody is looking at it. And it's the first word out of everybody's mouth. And they can't look at it.
Would you please replay my exact words to me?
You said I haven't invested. You said I have not invested any money in Bitcoin. Those were your exact words. But I'm not here to pay.
What I remember saying is that I have a fraction of a Bitcoin. You asked me how many Bitcoins do I have? And I said I have a fraction of a Bitcoin.
Okay. All right. But
I don't believe I said I have invested in Bitcoin because I don't have anything to invest. I said I accumulated a fraction of a Bitcoin, and it was difficult for me to do.
Okay. Well,
let me go further. The model of Bitcoin is a different economic model than what you have on Wall Street, and that's why Wall Street is trying to kill Bitcoin. That's why you have all of these massive DDoS attacks on a variety of Bitcoin exchanges, and even criminal prosecutions for very minor things of a number of figures in the growing Bitcoin economy, because it is a different model. It is decentralized. It is not based on a central bank model of producing trillions of units of whatever currency it is. It's not based on issuing currency at interest. If you have Bitcoins, even a fraction, there's no interest involved. It's a different way of doing business. And what is being developed is to bring this to market, not just in the developed countries, but into the underserved, so-called undeveloped or developing countries in Latin America and Africa and Asia, where it'll operate even out in the boonies, because you know what? You don't need a bank to use Bitcoin.
Well, yeah, exactly. Now, Bitcoin
use banks.
Bitcoin's idea, its very foundation is a great one. There's no question about it. Some type of currency that that is out of the control of the Federal Reserve. That idea is a fantastic one and a great one. But until the very foundation of Bitcoin is understood by everybody, where it is money and not an investment, because right now nobody wants to spend Bitcoins. There's no way to really spend it. Well, hold on. Let me finish. Until they get
businesses accepting Bitcoins.
No,
there are more and more people using them.
No, not yet. We're talking about dozens.
You're not plugged in.
We're not.
There are a lot of millions of people already.
Doctor. There's only so many Bitcoins out there. That's the first thing. The second, everybody is holding on to them and wondering what the exchange is going to do the next day. Nobody is paying for cab fare with a Bitcoin. Buying.
Let's back up here. You've made some false statements, Jimmy.
Oh, I've got some serious guys that advise me every day on Bitcoin.
Many companies that are accepting Bitcoins now.
Many.
Yeah,
it's in dozens. It's not tens of thousands.
No, it's far more than dozens.
How many ATM machines are there right now handling Bitcoin in the world?
Pardon me?
How many ATM machines handle Bitcoin in the world right now today?
I couldn't give you an exact number. It's growing.
Two.
No, there's more than that.
No, 2.
It's growing.
Okay. But anyway, that's beside the point. My point is it's a great idea.
In 1898, how many cars were there in Kansas? I believe they were 2, and they ran into each other. And they had an accident. But
exactly.
At the beginning, how many human beings were there at the very beginning? 2.
Exactly. Like I said, the idea is great. We need to change the philosophy, the way people look at Bitcoin. Right now, they're trying to
including your philosophy. You're running down something that you don't know.
What's my philosophy on Bitcoin?
Rapidly expanding.
But what's my philosophy? I just told you. It's a great one.
I don't know.
Okay, well then you can't say including your philosophy, because I believe in Bitcoin. And if you've ever listened to this show, any one of the listeners that listen to this show, and I can take a phone call after phone call, I have spoken about Bitcoin and its philosophy and what it is nearly every day on this show.
What's going to happen with Bitcoin is that no one knows if Bitcoin per se will survive, and 20 years from now there will be Bitcoin. But the genie is out of the bottle, and whether Bitcoin itself survives, the concept of cryptocurrency, that's a currency that's digitally based, encrypted, and out of the control of the central banker's hands and the big banking firms in the city of London and in Manhattan, that horse has fled the barn and cannot be corralled again. It's out there. It's in the wild. And that in itself is, like I said earlier, ideas themselves have tremendous value. And the more powerful the idea, the more valuable it is. And I can tell you that from what I know of it and the communications I've had, some of the brightest technical minds that human race currently has are working in the Bitcoin community, and they are dedicated to the concept of freedom and economic parity and decentralization. We are now at that inflection point. It's messy, it's uneven, but Bitcoin or something like it or some things like it are here to stay.
Yeah, and I think once we get over one of the problems that I had initially with Bitcoin, and now my people have been advising me on this, and it's a little bit more clear cut. But one of the things that the general fear is theft and hacking, and with GOC going down, with 850,000 Bitcoins vanishing, those people are out of their Bitcoin. I don't want to say out of their investment because that's the wrong word, but they've lost their Bitcoins. But with that fear, it's no different than any other bank that was robbed at gunpoint in the 1930s by Ma Barker. What you go in, you steal the cash, and you run away with it. So you're going to have
Let
that
me give
problem.
you an example.
But
I worked for many years as a residential window cleaner, and I worked for, of course, poor people don't pay to have their windows cleaned. They don't have that many of them on their house to begin with. But wealthy people do, and they frequently have a lot of windows and large ones. So I worked, I had some wealthy clients, of course, and this was in 2008. I was working on a very large 10,000 square foot house. It took me 2 very long days to clean all the glass. And I noticed the man of the house was not around, so I asked his wife where he was, and she said, well, he's not feeling well. I said, well, I'm sorry to hear that. You come down with a cold or something? She says, no. And she made an astonishing admission to me that week, and this was the week in 2008, September, I think, when everything went south fast and hard, they lost about 70% of their net assets when the markets crashed that week. And his heart wasn't feeling well. Poor man. You spend he had worked in real estate and other fields, and you think you got $10 million for your retirement, and 5 days later, all of a sudden, you only have $3 million. And so you're thinking, God, if this lasts another 4 days, we'll be in the street with tin cans, selling pencils or something. And so that wasn't Bitcoin. Those were accounts in brick and mortar brokerages and so forth, in Manhattan and Chicago and where else. So people think, well, Bitcoin is vulnerable to disappearing. If you're careful, probably less vulnerable to disappearing than if you have money with J.P. Morgan, for example.
Well, again, my point, which is addressing your point, and then we can move on. We have so many other things that I want to get to. But the thing is with Bitcoin is because it is decentralized and not backed by anything, it eventually is going to end. I don't care if it starts at zero, it goes to $2,000 each, or it's worth ounces of gold for each Bitcoin. I don't care what it peaks out at. It's going to eventually end back at zero, just like the American dollar. Yeah, its value is going to be zero because
actually mathematically.
But hold on, Doctor. I gave you a chance, Doctor. Let me finish.
Yes.
The dollar, just like you are suggesting, and I'm agreeing with you. The dollar was originally backed by gold and silver, and so it had value backing it up. And so when you were trading a paper dollar, you knew that there was something behind it. When that standard was finished, and now we are trading in confidence, what is behind it is the United States. Acres and miles of corn and exports and workers and everything else. So that's what's behind that. Now, today, is that confidence as strong as it was 20 years ago? No, it's not. But with Bitcoin, it's starting with nothing. It's got a tough road in front of it. I believe in its decentralized ethic. I do. I really do. And I want it to go, but I just feel that because there's nothing backing it. The dollar started it with something behind it. And that's why it is what it is today. The Bitcoin has got a different road in front of it. And as long as everybody gets out of if they start spending the stupid things instead of collecting them and hedging on them, if that happens, then it could get some traction and take off. I'm very curious.
Traction. People are spending it, and if you go and read the articles at BitcoinMagazine.com, there are other Bitcoin news sites. A lot of people are spending them every month, every week. More and more people are spending them increasingly. It is a medium of economic financial exchange. What is behind Bitcoin that is not behind the dollar, in fact, is transparency. The source code for Bitcoin is open. The blockchain is also open. So you have a transparency with Bitcoin that does not exist and never has existed. with the U.S. dollar, for example.
And it's a phenomenal idea. It is. It's a great idea. And if you trade in Bitcoin,
it's more than an idea. It's a reality that it's transparent in a way that the so-called traditional financial system is not, and never will be, has never been, is not, never will be, as designed cannot be. Bitcoin, as I said before, starts from a different premise, limits the number of Bitcoins. I doubt there ever will be 21 million Bitcoins in circulation because they are harder and harder and more expensive to bring into existence because of the amount of electricity that it takes to run computers to solve these extremely complex algorithms that generate more Bitcoin. We may actually be approaching a limit soon of where there will be very few more Bitcoins. So it's exactly 180 degrees the opposite economic model, financial model pursued by the central banks. Totally
it's exactly the opposite. Yeah, the Federal Reserve, let's print more money and let's collect interest on it and let's loan it to the government. I get that.
And that's a lie about what we're doing on top of it.
Yeah, that's a whole, you're absolutely right. It's 180 degrees, opposite philosophy. But it's just my fear with Bitcoin, and I believe in Bitcoin. Let me make this perfectly clear.
I don't believe in it. For me, it's not a religious faith. I don't have a belief in it. I'm just stating objectively what it is.
Well, I just think it starts off. It's kind of like when you're born. You're born with nothing, and then you die with nothing, and that's kind of what Bitcoin is going to end up doing. It's going to start at zero, and eventually it's going to end at zero, and then we'll have this really cool thing in the middle. And there's no telling how many other cryptocurrencies are going to be created and perfected, and the methodology behind it gets perfected, and we work it out. Bitcoin, unfortunately, is the first one, or it's the first one we've heard of, I should say, and it's the first one out there. And it's you've got to learn. It's a little baby right now. We'll see. It's about the status quo, understanding what it is, and don't treat it as stock. Don't treat it as real estate. Don't treat it like gold. Spend them. Don't collect them, and then it'll be worth something. And then
Well, it already is worth something. People already are using in commerce.
Well, again, Silk Road is gone.
No, I'm not talking about Silk Road.
But
I mean, if you go and you research, there are literally the number increases every day. There are websites that list the stores and companies and businesses who now accept Bitcoin, and it's just growing all the time. So it's a growing economy. And in fact, the Bitcoin economy now exceeds the gross domestic product of a number of countries. So it's no longer just a niche market or a curiosity. It is becoming a economic power in its own right. And that is why the central banks and national regulatory agencies, especially in the United States, have begun to go after it with a vengeance because their power base, which is fundamentally rooted in fear and naked force, is starting to be threatened by people with a different vision of economic parity and cooperation.
Now, we got into this whole. We can move on. We got into Bitcoin. This is the beauty of just sitting and talking, okay? Because we started to talk about the Cold War in Crimea. We ended up on
it's all related. You see, it's all related.
It is all related. That's what I said. That's the beauty of a conversation. So let's back up. And my original question was, which we ended up on Bitcoin, but the original question was, do you think we're on the verge of a second Cold War? Are we right there? Is that where we're headed?
Well, the Cold War was a fiction to begin with. The big banks were bankrolling both sides. The so-called Bolshevik Revolution in Russia, someone like Lenin didn't come out of nowhere. He had powerful forces behind him in the financial capitals of the Western world. You just don't come in and take over a country of 80 million people without having powerful backers. So the Cold War was a trumped-up affair to begin with. And essentially it was decided to take down the Soviet Union as it was then and to emphasize the Western European model and North American model, the post-World War II Japanese
well,
model.
when you say trumped up, what time frame, what era of the Cold War was trumped up? I mean, I don't understand.
All of it, from one end to the other. It was all trumped up. This whole planet is scripted.
Okay.
We're living in a
I want you to
reality.
Okay. So
and what I'm telling you is the script has reached another inflection point where something else is getting ready to happen. With a scripted reality, the only question is who's scripting it. And what are the terms?
Well, I have this question with each guest because I'm fascinated. I've never gotten the same answer out of anybody, and I've had the biggest and brightest minds on this show, period. Yes. And you're one of them. Now, but everybody says the same thing. Somebody's pulling strings. It's scripted. It's New World Order. It's planned. It's this and that. I get all the trilateral this. Okay, and I respect everybody's position. But I'm going to ask you that question. Who, you just said the question is who? Who is writing it? Because if we have Putin right now doing his thing,
well, various
we've
factions,
got. But
there's more than one script writer.
Let me finish the question though, and then
yes, sir.
Okay, so we have Putin doing his thing. We have China doing their thing. We've got North Korea doing their thing. We've got Syria running off the rails right now, and here we have the United States sitting over here. That I don't think anybody's telling Putin what to do. I really feel that. I don't think anybody is. I don't know if somebody is telling Obama or our administration what to do, and I don't think that's really going on. So I don't think there's anybody above directing China, the United States, and Russia as to who's going to have an outcome of what situation, monetarily or militarily. That's my view. But everybody cries about this going on. So if it's going on, who is doing it? That's all I want to know.
Well, let's say you have your hand is in a glove, okay, and you look at someone wearing a glove on their hand, and you see, well, the thumb is doing one thing, and the little finger is doing something else, and the ring finger is doing something, is not even moving, and the let's see, the index finger, well, it's moving, but not like the thumb is, or the little finger is. So you draw the conclusion, whatever or whoever is controlling the fingers on that hand, it's not the same entity, but in fact it is. The fingers belong to the same hand that is connected to the same arm that comes out of the same body that is being directed by the same mind. So just because you see multiple actors carrying out different agendas does not mean that something isn't scripted, including by a central scripting authority that could be using different actors for different purposes in different ways to achieve an overarching aim that it recognizes, but that is lost in the noise by someone looking on who doesn't understand what's happening at a meta level of reality. So that's my simple answer to a seemingly complex question. Now, one of the things that I noticed first off when I came to South America, and my overarching reason for being here, and still is because it's a prime motivation in my life, was to seek the deeper nature of reality, to seek after lasting truth, which I do with a degree of imperfection. I'm a flawed human being like everyone listening to this program.
Mm-hmm.
But in my own way, I've tried to do this, and it was a prime motivation in coming to South America to be exposed to shamanism
Well, let's get to shamanism because we're going to spend the rest of the show on that, and that is a big part of my life too now as well. So let's get to that in a second. But one of the things, because I told you before the show, I lived in Central America. I lived in Panama. I lived there for 4 years, and you've been in Ecuador for quite a long time. And what a lot of the status quo here in the United States, a lot of Americans never get a chance to leave the country. Maybe not even leave the state. They're content.
It's
whatever.
like a prison.
But
it's
prison. not that at all. But that's your opinion. But what I mean is, even though
it is.
But even though you're right,
it's a prison.
But when I was down in Central America, the one thing that I realized is I could go about my day not thinking about the world. I could go and discover things. I could go and just do things all day long and not have to listen to the radio, not have to watch television, not go to the movies, not do anything, and just go out and learn and explore and do stuff all day long and get disconnected from what was going on in the world. I wouldn't listen to the news. I would just disconnect myself. And,
let me back you up here.
But hold on. But let me
you listen to network news that you're finding out what's going on in the world.
Well, I can tell you should listen to this show once in a while because that's exactly what I say every single day. Okay? That's exactly my message.
Or when you watch television that you're finding out what's going on in the world. You're just watching a fraudulent reality.
But that's why you're a guest on this show, Doctor. Okay? All right? Okay? This show is about just that. And
let's get deeper into what ayahuasca showed me then.
Well, we will. But I need to finish on we didn't even touch upon where we were going, which was the Cold War, Crimea, and the United States.
That's what I have to tell you. That's the point of what I have to tell you about what ayahuasca showed me.
Okay. All right. You know what? I will indulge you, and we'll jump into it now. It's 9:00. Okay. You know what? I normally take a break at 9. Let's go ahead and move forward. Graham Hancock is going to be a future guest on this show. And I know that you and Graham share philosophies that I have been studying too as well. So let's go. What is shamanism? Let's start there with a basic explanation for everybody out there, and because we're going to be talking about that a lot, and I think there's a lot of misconceptions out there. Is it good? Is it evil? Is it dark? Is it light? Is it a bunch of guys just recreationally using drugs for fun? There's all those misconceptions out there. So what is it? And then I'll ask my next question.
Well, with shamanism, I think it's can be as different as there for every person as there are shamans. Every individual shaman will work with different plants or different animals, different techniques. But for me, shamanism involves a natural communion with the world, if you will, through the other life forms, plants and animals, and entering into direct spiritual communication with nature. There are a variety of ways to do that. A lot of shamans chant, but not all of them do. Many shamans use so-called psychotropic plants or entheogenic plants, though not all of them do. But in general, a shaman will entrain the consciousness of those who come with him, to him, or her. They're female shamans as well, in order to enter into an altered state of consciousness where any variety of ills or problems in the body or mind or emotions or spirit can be viewed and addressed from other dimensions and other realities and healed. That's the curative aspect of shamanism. Now, it's also possible to do pure spiritual exploration for the purpose of entering into the spiritual realms and communicating directly with the denizens of the spirit realms for a variety of reasons.
Did you move to Ecuador to follow this, or did you move to Ecuador first and then learn about it?
I just came as a tourist, and I visited a couple of shamans within about a 2.5 or 3 week period. And after I was here about 20 days, it was not my intent to remain in Ecuador. I had a round trip plane ticket.
Right.
I fully intended to return. But based on, I had no idea what to expect and still don't.
How did you chase down? Let me
finish. But I woke up one morning with the idea that I'm not going back because something changed in me. It was directly communicating with the spirits. The plants that are used in shamanism, they're actually very intelligent. In fact, in my experience, they're far more intelligent and perceptive than the great mass of humanity. Most human beings would say, well, I'm wide awake, I'm intelligent, I'm thinking, I know what's going on. But, by comparison to these plants, not only ayahuasca, but malakawa, the San Pedro cactus, and there are others, many others, ibogas used by African shamans. The average human being cannot hold a candle to these plants in terms of wisdom and knowledge and cosmic awareness.
Well, how do you, as a tourist, you're in, you go down to Ecuador. I'm assuming you went to Quito, and so you're a tourist in downtown Quito. How do you go from being a tourist to seeking out a shaman? How do you
because
cross
that's me. I mean, you talk to people, you visit websites on the internet, you communicate with people by email, and you read reviews, and you just do due diligence to the extent that you can, and it's like anything else in life. It's like getting married or getting a job or whatever. Your intention is for things to work out, and if you're careful, they probably will. But half of marriages in the United States fall apart. What can I say? You do the best you can.
Okay, well, take
like
me to
anything else in life. But let me finish. For me, the important thing is what the plants showed me.
Well,
And
that's my question, Doctor.
The whole global reality that humanity is enveloped in is fake. There's been a fake, false reality, a meta reality.
Well, exactly. So let's figure
on the globe.
Doctor. Let's figure out. I want to hear how you got to that point. You're jumping way ahead. So, hold on. There's a method to my madness. So let me keep a direction going here.
Yes.
So you meet your first shaman. You've never drank, you've never smoked ayahuasca or DMT or anything like that before. You have no idea about the experience that's about to happen to you. So I want to go to that first moment, because that first moment was probably the most dramatic. I'm assuming that it was. So that first moment, you're sitting there with the shaman. He's going to give you some advice, which you had to take and you have to listen to, and thankful. And I know that you are now that you got that advice. So take me to that.
Ayahuasca?
No, absolutely not.
Well,
I have plenty of friends that have.
Instead of telling me what's going to happen, since you've never been in a ceremony with ayahuasca, why not let me tell you about it, because I have been.
That's what I just asked you. I said, Take me to that first moment, Doctor.
The ayahuasca has a very unpleasant taste. I haven't vomited every time that I've drunk it, but I have vomited many times that I've drunk it, and that's the experience of the vast majority of people who drink it. It is a foul-tasting brew. It's not something you do recreationally. It's certainly not something I would ever do recreationally, because it is an unpleasant tasting substance, and it's oftentimes it's hard for me to drink it now without gagging and retching, almost barfing it right after I drink it. You don't drink a lot of it because you can't and hold it down. You just drink a small little cup of it, a very small cup, and the effects are different every time for me. It's said of ayahuasca that it doesn't give you what you want, but rather what you need. And I like to add maybe what it needs, because it is considerably intelligent and perceptive. My perception of ayahuasca, and Malikawa as well, is that after you drink these substances for a period of at least 20 minutes and maybe as much as 40 minutes or even 45 minutes, it can appear that nothing is happening. What it's doing is working at a very deep level in you. My perception is that it is reading your genetic code, your life history, your karma, if you will, your thoughts, your life philosophy, what you've done, your purpose. And drinking ayahuasca, your capacity for experiencing self-knowledge, your capacity for absorbing what it may show you or have to reveal to you in one way or another. And then it's as if you're sitting, for me, in a movie theater in a chair, and the lights go down, the audience hushes, the curtain parts, and coming attractions appear on the screen. And it's always different. Ayahuasca can give you very profound, intuitive, and telepathic downloads of information that just appear in your mind. They're just there. How does it come? It's direct out of the ether from ayahuasca to you. And it can show you visions. They can be quite clear. It can reveal things to you about other people. You can just get instant, intuitive, telepathic insight into other people, into their being, their motivations, what they're thinking about doing, what sort of person they are, etc., and certainly into yourself as well. And in my case, time and time again, ayahuasca has shown me that there is a type of machine intelligence. And when I say machine, don't think about a production line in an automobile manufacturing facility, for example. I don't mean it in that sense. What I'm talking about is far more sophisticated, far more subtle, far more powerful, and with incredible insight into not only human physiology, but human psychology and our emotional makeup. This machine is multidimensional. It's active in the physical three-dimensional world, and also in the near physical spiritual realms, which we call astral. I saw, and ayahuasca showed me aspects of this machine again and again. It is seductive beyond telling. It sucks people into it any way it can. Some people like money. Some people get off on power. Some people gotta have cocaine, just got to have it, etc. The machine will make sure you get these things if you just do its work. And its work appears to be the subversion of the biosphere on this planet and of humanity itself by any means possible, fair or foul. If you want a brass nameplate on an office door, an an MBA degree from Harvard Business School, it'll give you that. In exchange, it wants your soul. It wants you to do its work. And so when we see the governments of the world doing the insane things that they do, preparing for war or carrying out war, when we see the trashing and the polluting of the world's seas, when we see the insanity of Fukushima, nuclear arms race, economic order that has impoverished 50% or more of the human race, subsists on $2.50 or less per day. All of this is the working of the machine to grind down humanity and bring this planet to its knees, and it's having tremendous success. I was actually shown in a vision that I had to keep from getting sucked into because it was very not enticing but powerful at a tremendous pool. I saw people coming in, and this was not in the physical. This would have been in the astral realm, to a place that looked like a milking parlor. It reminded me of a milking parlor at a dairy farm where the cattle come in and they have the suction devices attached to their teats, and then the milk is sucked out and into a system of vacuum tubes, and then there are pipes overhead that drain the milk away into these huge stainless steel vats where the milk is collected and stored by the hundreds, even thousands of gallons, and then huge tanker trucks come to the dairy farms and take the milk away to be processed into cheese, yogurt, butter, etc.
Okay.
And people were coming in, and they would sit down in long rows. And then there was a device that would be attached to the top of their head where the crown chakra is, and their essential life essence or vital essence was being sucked off into a system of tubes overhead, and then this energy or vital essence was being taken away somewhere else to be processed in some way that I didn't see. That was the basic dynamic. And it had a feel of a Las Vegas type of feel. In fact, I was saying casino, 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 flashing lights. Ayahuasca was showing me that, like big Las Vegas casino billboards with flashing lights.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, it said
Mm-hmm.
casino, casino, casino.
Mm-hmm.
And then it had the emotionally and psychologically, it had the feel of a whorehouse or an opium den, where people come to get sucked off, and their eyes were glazed, and they were like looked like dope addicts that had just been doped up and were just blissful to be sucked off by this,
And this was
machine type of mechanism.
Okay, well, let's keep it clean. Let's keep it clean. Now, was
this
this
is
all
what ayahuasca?
Well,
this is
I
what
understand.
ayahuasca was showing me.
Wait, yeah,
how
but
people are
keep-
we'll keep it clean. I'm telling you what's going down on this planet, man.
Okay.
I'm telling you how humanity is being debased and degraded and
I get
destroyed.
it. Now,
People
Doctor,
people were plugging into this.
Doctor,
And
was this in one session?
please just call me Richard.
Okay, Richard, was this in one session? One
I've
vision?
drunk ayahuasca many times.
No,
and
I'm saying this vision that you just told me. Was this in one
that was in
session?
my first ayahuasca session.
You're kidding.
No, I'm not.
How did you well, I don't mean you're kidding. I mean, I'm just like, whoa. So you're kidding. That's a lot to take in. And
Not for me, because I've had a lot of not prior experience with ayahuasca, but I've done a lot of deep thinking. I've done a lot of research. I've had other revelations. I mean, I talk about some of these things in Kundalini Tales. I mean, it's a truism in life that you can know as much as you want to know. Most people want to know very little, it turns out, for whatever reason.
Right.
But if you want to know a lot, you will know a lot. If you want to have deep perception, you will have deep perception. If you prefer to be a shallow being with little knowledge and a superficial perception, then guess what? So you will be.
Sure.
I was drinking ayahuasca I wanted to know. I asked certain questions to ayahuasca. Show me what's going on Earth. What's happening on Earth? What's explanation for what's happening on this planet? And that's what it showed me.
Was ayahuasca male or female to you?
To me, neither. There are people who say that it's female.
Yeah,
but
most of
to
my
me-
friends say female. Yeah.
But to me, it's neither. To me, the two plants. Ayahuasca is not one plant. There is a vine, and then there are the leaves of another plant that are combined. I won't go into details of the preparation. I've seen it done numerous times, and I've also done it myself or helped to do it, so I know very well how to do it. But it's not just one plant. It's a combination of two plants or more to make the brew called ayahuasca. So when people talk about the ayahuasca plant as if the brew is made from only one plant, it's not. It's made from at least two and sometimes three and even more plants, but at least two.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's not just one. And then for me, what I have perceived ayahuasca to be, I have not personified it. To me, ayahuasca is the brew, speaking of the brew, unleashes a type of broader awareness or understanding or perception in the human mind. It's a type of a symbiotic relationship or cooperative relationship between human intelligence and the intelligences of the plant world, or at least a few of the intelligences of the plant world. So what I see rather is a cooperative, intelligent exploration of relevant aspects of reality that are pertinent to the participating intelligences at that time. And it changes from time to time. It's never the same for me. However, on subsequent drinkings, on multiple occasions, ayahuasca has shown me other aspects of this, what I've called a machine intelligence. And other people have communicated with me. I'm not the only person who's had this type of experience. There have been other people who have had similar experiences, and I've heard from some of them. It's, for me, it's neither male nor female. Rather, it's an entry point to a vast way of knowing. Let's put it that way.
When I ask, I talk about this all the time. I'm very curious. I may be a little too old to go down that road now.
Why not drink it yourself? And find out instead of
exactly.
asking me?
But so a couple of other just fundamental questions, and I know that everybody's curious. Is it purely visual? Or does ayahuasca actually speak to you?
No, it can be very auditory. It can be visual. It's definitely very bodily centered. Ayahuasca,
right?
Always. There's always Mount Vesuvius in the stomach. One of the things ayahuasca works on multiple levels: physical level, emotional, mental, spiritual, psychological, multiple dimensions simultaneously. And that's other thing it makes you appreciate is this demarcation, this linear division we have between different aspects of our experience is false. It's all interconnected and related. It's all one ball of reality, so to speak. And so in that sense, ayahuasca is very integrative, physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. No, it can communicate with you visually, but also audibly. One of the common effects of ayahuasca is to hear a buzzing sound. It can sound something like, sometimes electronic equipment can have a slight buzz or hum.
Right.
Insects. For me, some people describe it as the buzzing sound of insects on a lazy summer evening in the Midwest, say, or in the Deep South. Or it can be like the faint hum of electronic equipment, something along those lines. I don't always hear that, but I sometimes do, and many other people have experienced that as well. It's a quite common experience. But you can hear other things as well. You can hear voices. You can be spoken to, or you can hear other kinds of sounds. They could be from animals, or you could hear spirits that would come and speak to you. Oftentimes, on occasions when the spirits have spoken to me, it's always been subliminally. So I have to strain to figure out, is that Spanish or is that English? I can't quite determine. Or is it Quechua, which is one of the native South American languages?
Right.
Is it Quechua or Spanish or English, or is it some mixture? And I strain to hear. And that's the point of the spirits talking like that. It can be right in your ear, and you can't quite, at least I can't quite make out what the words are and exactly what language it is. It's right on the edge of my conscious awareness, and that's the point. They're putting it in my subconscious, not in my conscious.
Right. Are you?
And then you can have physical experiences. You can sometimes feel things.
Well, that's my question. Do you ever walk around, or are you sitting?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
So are you able to walk through the jungles of Ecuador and just go and listen to nature? And how does that affect you?
Well, I wouldn't do that as a newbie. If I were a newbie, I'd stay close to the shaman.
Right.
I mean, you're asking for trouble if you do that, buddy.
Right.
It's like anything else. You have to use a degree of common sense.
Right.
This is not something you do recreationally, where you drink it and say, "Oh, I'm just going to walk around and check things out." And
I'm not even suggesting that at all.
I wouldn't recommend that.
No, I'm not suggesting that. I'm not suggesting that.
The common experience is to just sit quietly and contemplatively. And however, if you feel an attack of diarrhea coming on, I would recommend that you walk to the toilet.
Right.
Usually you'll be given a bucket to vomit in,
Right.
or you get up and remove yourself from the circle to vomit, and then after you're through retching, you come back so as not to vomit on your neighbor, or so as not to shower your neighbor with diarrhea. You go and do your business outside the circle and then come back. So yes, you can get up and walk around, but usually you don't feel like getting up and walking around. You feel like sitting there cross-legged or in a chair, or you. Oftentimes people may recline. This is usually drunk at night. There will usually be no light or maybe a very feeble campfire. The idea is to focus on what ayahuasca has to reveal to you.
Right.
And it's always had something for me, and it's always different. Now, one of the other things it showed me was, on one occasion, this is a little over 2 years ago, I'd gone out and with the shaman I was with at that time, we constructed a lean-to from branches and things we found in the jungle. And just as we finished the lean-to, there was just heavy rainfall from then on the rest of the night. But I drank the ayahuasca after we finished the lean-to, and what I asked it was to show me the future, near future understood, not thousands of years in the future, but the relatively near term. And what it showed me was grim dictatorship. It was just like looking at a computer monitor or television, flat panel television screen. And I thought, oh man, this is, it must have understood. Now, mind you, ayahuasca understands very well.
Right.
So I mentally formulated the question again. And about 30 seconds later, identically 100%, the same vision just bang, popped into view in my inner visual field. And because I had my eyes closed, and I thought, okay, well, that's the answer. You know, that's not really very hopeful. That's not.
But a dictatorship
where
in Ecuador?
Let me tell you. No, my understanding was for the United States, but broader than the United States. Here's what it showed me. It showed me and understand. It'll show you things, the essence of things, and it showed me a vast forest, not unlike the Amazon, but it was a vast forest, and with the stars overhead, it was nature. But it showed me a large area in the middle of this forest that had been bulldozed. And in the middle of this large multi-acre area that had been bulldozed, there was a grim concentration camp, looked like out of Nazi Germany, or a gulag out of Soviet Union, something like that. And there were tall fences with barbed wire on top, and gun towers in the corners, and harsh lights, and military vehicles parked there, and just ugly, just vicious, and just brooding and foreboding and demonic looking. And I thought, holy moly, that looks nasty. But there was more to it. Shimmering overhead in the air, kind of ephemeral-like, about 15 or 20 feet in the air, was a control grid. It was like a mesh. It was like almost like a fishnet with small rectangular mesh. But it wasn't that. It was electronic, but more than electronic. It was a control grid, and what was downloaded to me telepathically was it's an electronic control grid, but more than that, meant to control not just the actions, but the thoughts and emotions and even the spirit of human beings. In other words, total totalitarianism, not just physical totalitarianism, but body, mind, and spirit. And that this was what was going to be implemented. This I was given to know. And now we see this happening on every hand. More and more police control in the United States, but not only the United States. The militarization of the police, people being gunned down. I mean, we hear YouTube is full of videos, hundreds, maybe more, of people just being whacked and brutalized and beaten and tortured by the cops. And we read these stories of SWAT teams coming in and just blowing people away in their beds in the middle of night without search warrants and on and on. And then we see these armored personnel carriers that are going out to local police departments, more and more laws every year. And now Edward Snowden popped up about 8 or 9 months ago or so with his revelations about how the NSA is surveilling everyone all the time, everywhere. And he says that...
I'm sorry, I had my microphone cut off. I was typing a quick text. Do you think... what do you think about, like, maybe John Kerry? Do you think he should visit the ayahuasca and have a little conversation? Or is that? Yeah, well, but okay, that's a good answer actually. Or are they too far along in their belief system to have a course correction now?
They don't have beliefs. They just have behaviors, programmed behaviors. Someone like John Kerry, Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, etc. My perception is that they are demon possessed.
Okay.
By the machine. They are appendages of the machine.
Okay, not demon possessed like in a Catholic sense, but in a philosophical sense.
There are demons, and once you work with ayahuasca, you will come to understand that this machine is very demonic in its orientation. It does not mean well. It's not just that it's vicious. I mean, it's really malevolent.
So you don't think you don't think if Obama and Putin went and saw a shaman down in Bolivia, that they couldn't come out of this with a...
They won't. They won't.
What if they did? Let's just say if. Let's go to that hypothetical. No.
They won't. They won't. So it's a nonsensical question. The proof that they won't is that they haven't and they aren't. Those types of people don't. That's not their orientation. Especially Obama. I would say that actually I believe Putin does have a spiritual side. I don't believe Obama does.
And okay.
If I had to judge, I would say Putin does have a human spiritual side. I don't think Obama does. I don't think Kerry does.
Have you ever smoked it, Richard?
You don't smoke ayahuasca.
No, DMT. Have you ever smoked it, or is it? No. You've only drank it, ayahuasca.
Well, ayahuasca, you see, is not DMT. There may be some DMT in it, but there are many other things as well.
Right.
So there's more than one compound in ayahuasca. You are drinking the juices of 2 or more Amazon jungle plants. So it's not just, there's a synergistic interplay between multiple plants and human biochemistry. So it's not a simple thing. It's not a superficial or simple thing. It's very deep, and like I said earlier,
it is. And what do you think about some of these, the kids that are recreationally doing it now, on the streets, and they're doing it just to get kicks and not understanding of really what it is and what it can do?
Well, you see, that's degrading.
That's
the other thing. That's the other thing ayahuasca revealed to me, that including indigenous culture in South America, but human culture in general, is degraded, and it recognizes that. And it recognizes that a lot of people are coming to ayahuasca for degraded reasons. You should approach ayahuasca as a deep opportunity to commune with profound levels of intelligence and reality. And if you don't do that, then I've seen people in South America try, like they're flying in from Berkeley, they're coming in from Soho, they go to Cali in Colombia and they dance some salsa. They go down to Peru and they visit Machu Picchu. And then they go over to the Amazon to drink a little ayahuasca. And then they're going to fly back to London or to Chicago. You follow me? And they've done the South American thing. It's just superficial as all hell.
Mm-hmm.
And so they drink it. They may or may not vomit. And I've heard them say, well, it didn't do anything for me. No, it didn't. And the reason it didn't is because they're so empty, so superficial, so shallow, like cardboard cutouts of people.
Mm-hmm.
There's no there.
Right.
And in my experience, if ayahuasca reads you and it sees, what am I dealing with here? I'm dealing with some girl that went to get an MBA from Harvard, and then she's pulling down big bucks at the Comex in Chicago, and now she comes down to the Amazon. She's going to drink ayahuasca and get enlightened. And ayahuasca says, what is there to enlighten?
Right.
Just pure how can you enlighten pure ignorance?
Right. Right. No, I get it, and I understand it. I
I've
do.
seen that. I've seen these people. One place I was, these two young women came in, professional types, and I think they were actually from Soho in Manhattan. And they came in. They're in a hut in Amazon, and they're discussing. Well, we don't have any white wine. Could we use some of this red wine instead? And I'm thinking, what the hell? You're in the Amazon, baby. You're not at a 4-star restaurant in Lower Manhattan. You're here to drink ayahuasca, and you think, well, we don't have any champignon, we don't have any white wine. I'm thinking, why are you even here?
Right. No, they're there for kicks.
And then they drank ayahuasca. Yeah. They drank ayahuasca, and nothing happened. And I was thinking, well, what did they expect?
Hey, listen, Richard, I've only got a few minutes left, and and first off, thank you for the show tonight. But I got to get you. We're going to change gears really fast.
Let's do it.
Let's talk about this Malaysian. I've literally got 5 or 6 minutes left before I have to close out the show. What is? Well, okay. Let's just cut to a basic question. What do you think happened to the plane? What is your? I mean, if you and I are sitting on my couch right now, and we're watching the talking heads on CNN, right? And I turn to you, and I just, Richard, what do you where is this thing? What do you think happened?
Well, it's not at the airport in Kuala Lumpur.
Yeah.
Yeah. It left there. That much we know, or at least we think we know. Here's my gut feeling. I haven't read everything there is out there on the internet about it, but I've read a decent amount in recent days. My guess is that either one or both of the pilots took over the plane and flew it somewhere else rather than to the international airport in Beijing.
Right.
Either that, or because the Boeing airliners can be remotely controlled. A lot of people don't know this, but they can be remotely controlled. Their avionics is wired that way so that the controls can be taken out of the hands of the pilot and co-pilot. So either the pilot and co-pilot are in on it or they're not. Actually, it doesn't matter because the plane can be commandeered either way and flown to a different destination. Obviously, it did not arrive at its scheduled destination. It went somewhere else. It doesn't appear to me that it crashed. There was that interesting sighting in the Maldive Islands, south of India, out in the Indian Ocean, which is to the west of Malaysia, like 1,000 miles or more.
Right.
And 1,500 miles, something like that. It's a good little ways. So it appears probable that the plane flew out to the central Indian Ocean. And Diego Garcia Island, which is part of the Chagas Islands in the mid-Indian Ocean, is the site of a major American military facility.
It might be the biggest, actually, as far as aircraft goes.
It's a big American base.
Huge.
It was taken over from the British 20 or 30 years ago. It's a major American military facility. And my best guess is that the three-letter American agencies, NSA, NRO, CIA, etc., know where this plane is. At the very least, they know where it is and may well have had some involvement in its disappearance. I'm guessing this plane is destined, whether it is used for that or not, for a possible upcoming false flag attack, that it will suddenly reappear to do something nasty, perhaps carry a nuclear bomb, to deliver a nuke, to nuke some city. I couldn't tell you what city because I'm not privy to any of this,
Mm-hmm.
but that's my guess that this is not business as usual, and some dark and nefarious plot is afoot involving the three-letter agencies, not only of the United States, but other countries such as Israel, perhaps Malaysia, and maybe Pakistan or
well,
who knows?
one thing that I find
more than one country. So that's in broad outline, that's what I think is going down. Understand that in this scenario, the pilots and the passengers are perfectly expendable and may already have been killed.
This is where a couple of scenarios kind of play out in my mind, but there's one thing that I find really funny is the timing of it. Number one, right? We got this thing going down right now with Ukraine and Crimea. There's that. And the second thing is Putin and Russia in general is strangely silent on this plane issue. And on all fronts, not assisting, or not that I know of at least, in coming forth or studying or questioning anything. They're not addressing it on any front.
Here's why. Because they're not involved. There's an old saying that the guilty will speak. And today, Barack Obama...
Well said.
Well, this is an ancient African saying, the guilty will speak. Barack Obama went on national television, and actually it was an international story, saying that the United States government will use its full resources to find out, what happened to this plane. Number one, it's not an American airline. It's on the other side of the world. Malaysia is precisely geographically on the other side of the world. It was not flying to the United States. It was going to Beijing. I don't even know if there were any Americans on it, or at least the majority of the passengers are Chinese. So why is this a big American deal? And yet the pilots' remote control, or the pilot's remote simulator is being flown to the United States to be examined by the FBI. Why not to China to be examined by the Chinese? Because the flight was going to Beijing, and most of the passengers were Chinese. So why is this thing being flown to the United States? Why is the FBI coming in on the investigation internationally? Why is it that the United States government is taking over this missing plane?
Well, there's a lot of excuses for all of that. You're absolutely right, though. But with any airline, major carrier type of plane crash around the world, the FAA goes in and assists on just about every. It doesn't matter if it's French or British or Chinese or Malay. I mean, it doesn't matter. I mean, we have experts.
They don't do it on anyone. They don't go into Russia when their plane crashes in Russia. When the Concorde crashed in France, the FAA didn't come on that.
Are you sure? Are you sure about that? Are you sure about that? I don't know. I'm just saying, are you sure about that? I don't know. But it sure seems like...
To my knowledge, the FAA is not involved in this.
They're not supposed to be, but I'm sure that they...
FBI is being unleashed on this. And I just found it very strange that Barack Obama says the American government is making this disappeared plane a priority.
Right.
And that's what he said. My question is, why?
Why?
It wasn't an American airline. It was flying between two Asian capitals. Most of the passengers were Chinese. So why is it an American priority?
Why, if terrorism was involved, which now I think clearly we can say or feel like it hasn't or wasn't involved, because nobody has stepped up and laid claim to this. And if it was terrorism, why would they stay quiet? That's the curious thing for me. So we can almost, going down the checklist, I think we all feared terrorism the first day it didn't show up, of course. But now we're in day, 13, 14, and the time is quickly slipping by us. And now I think we can scratch terrorism off. Or should we leave terrorism on the board?
I don't know. And how do you define terrorism?
Terrorism? you and I deciding to go out and crash a plane because we want to have green beer on every Monday of the month, and we're pissed off about it, and so we go fly a plane into some. That's terrorism. So
see, that hasn't happened.
Yeah, if you know what I mean. And so I think we can take that off of the table. I think we can take terrorism off. So who does that leave?
Well,
that's the scary thought.
It appears to leave the United States because the United States is speaking loudest and the mostest about this incident. So, which raises the question as to why. I'm back around to my original comment.
Right.
The guilty will speak.
Well, the Malaysians certainly aren't speaking. Yeah, that's if you look at it in those terms.
You never know what kind of pressure has been put on behind the scenes. If you know what's going on and you know that they whacked the passenger, the plane has disappeared and the passengers too. So if you know what's happened and something bad clearly has happened, and you know, hey, they'll kill 230 some odd people. What is it to kill one more individual? So that would be incentive to keep your mouth shut right there.
What is the reaction of the citizenry around the world, not just the United States, if that plane is found intact with the passengers alive, and we find out that the United States knew where it was all along, and so did China, and so did Pakistan, so did India, so did Vietnam, so did Malaysia. And that is, I mean, what? That's my fear. Know. That's my Pandora's box in this whole thing.
I don't know. It's a very peculiar episode. I'm 59 years old, and many strange things have happened in the world in my 59 years, and this is certainly one very peculiar incident.
Well, what I think, and as harsh as it is, it better have crashed, and nobody knew anything about it, because if it turns out to be the exact opposite, that plane is sitting on the ground somewhere, and we knew about it and didn't say anything, I hope everybody's alive and safe, but
there you go again, saying we. I'm not involved in this. I don't know who is, but I do know that the United States government has shown an awful lot of interest in taking over the investigation, commandeering what's evidence from the pilot's simulator from his own home. Since when does the United States government have control over criminal evidence in Malaysia?
Well, I think they just made a copy of the hard drive. They only sent a copy of the hard drive to...
I don't know.
No, they did. They did.
Know.
That ended up in Quantico.
But even that.
Well, yeah, you got a point there. Unless they just don't know what to do, they don't have the fortunate guys to get in on it. But
I think they got forensic experts in China and France, other countries. The Chinese have quite sophisticated electronics, and so do the Russians and others. But this has gone to the United States. Is it to examine evidence or to conceal evidence?
Dr. Richard Sauder, thank you for coming on the show tonight. I had a great time.
It's my pleasure.
And I hope you did too. And
yeah.
And again, if you find out anything, email me. And if you want to come on and talk again, please, absolutely contact us. And the door's always open. I had a great time. I really did.
Thank you, Jimmy. I appreciate it.
I appreciate it. Thank you. Good night. All right. Dr. Richard Sauder. And you know what? I have lost my music. Keith, if you can hear me. I know you're listening right now, but I have lost my music. All right. No big deal. All right, so thank you, Dr. Richard Sauder. I got a ton of email in tonight, and as you can imagine, I couldn't read all of it for my own reasons. But this is the last one that just came in. Great show. I love it. That's from Brad. And he says, I'm a pilot. Oh, really, Brad? I didn't know that. Brad's a pilot. He says you can't fly a 777 remotely. Well, okay. Keith just texted me. Keith, if you want to roll some music, I was going to take a quick break for 2 minutes, but and then come back and reset the end of the show. That's what I was going to do. You want to give me a countdown? Keith is in Phoenix. I'm in Los Angeles, and this is lovely. I love being able to do this. But anyway, okay, 5-4 Dark Matter Radio Network. Jimmy Church. I'll be back right after this. Stay with us, everybody. So tomorrow night's a really big show, and I would just want to talk about this really quick. Another PhD tomorrow night. Robert Zubrin from the Mars Society is tomorrow night, and I've been working on this for a long time. And he is a privateer that has written just about all of the spec sheets on how to get to Mars, how to live off of it, sustain it, get everything off of the planet that we need to live there and colonize and get back safely. He's also a radiation expert, and it is just one of the coolest. He's one of the coolest guys to get on. So that's going to be tomorrow night. Next week, I'm going to make the announcement on this now. Thursday night, we have Ronald Mallett, time travel, physics for University of Connecticut, UConn. And that's going to be next week. So we're going to do a big time travel show. And I've got a couple of other guests lined up. So that is going to be a great evening. And I just want to get all of that out there. Friday night this week will be Steve Murillo. Now, I'm bringing Steve back for a couple of reasons. Steve was the first guest here on Fade to Black. Steve is also, out of every guest that we have had on this show, I get requests every single day to get him back on. And I love it. I mean, he's a great guy and a great friend, but I didn't want to do, but it's also the anniversary of Fade to Black, and he was the first guest. And so I went and I talked to Steve, and I said, do you want? And he said, of course, let's do this, man. I said, okay, all right, let's do it. So this is what we're going to do on Friday night. We're going to have Steve live in the studio. He's going to be in here with me, and we are going to take calls all night. The conversation with Steve and I will be as colorful as ever, and we're going to cover all kinds of subjects. Of course, he's a pilot. He's a Marine pilot. And so he's got his opinions about what's going on with this Malaysian missing plane, too, as well. So there's that aspect. But also, Steve and I have the ability of going into any subject in any direction and have fun with it. And so that's the whole deal with Friday night. And so I want everybody to plan on calling in. We will take all the calls that we can, and we will open up all of the phone lines. Of course, email is always available. But so that is the plan, and we're going to have a great time with it. And that's about it. We have, let's see here. Let me scroll. I'm looking. Is that 3 minutes? 2 seconds? 1 second? Oh, we got 1 minute, 30 seconds. Okay, thanks. Stay tuned. Coming up next is Night Watch with host Todd Sheets and 5 or 6 co-hosts and a couple of guests, which means a whole buttload sitting around the table. It's always a great show. Love it. Special thanks to Keith Rowland, Art Bell, Fade to Black's executive producer is Rita Kumarian. Show is produced by Hilton J. Palm and Mark D. Kovar. The announcers are Steve Harder and Mark D. Kovar. And the D is there to separate himself from all of the other Kovars out there in the world. Music is by Doug Aldrich. Not right now. You're not listening to Doug. I don't even know what Keith is playing right now. Somebody email me and tell me. And that's about it. I'm going to roll on out of here. Fade to Black is produced by KJCR for the Dark Matter Radio Network. We'll see you tomorrow night, everybody. Thanks a lot. See ya.